Parliament was in session. Members were debating, the cameras were rolling live, and then the entire House of Commons started shaking. On camera, in real time, in front of the whole country. I have to say, when I saw this footage, I genuinely had to watch it twice because you don't expect that. Not in Canada, not in Ottawa, not inside the most powerful chamber in the country. And yet, on April 14th, 2026, at exactly 12:36 in the afternoon, the ground beneath Canada's capital moved. A magnitude 3.9 earthquake. The live stream cameras inside the House of Commons captured the moment it hit, the camera visibly shaking while parliamentarians sat at their desks debating. That is not something you see every day. That is not something you forget. And here's the thing, guys. This is not as simple as a little tremor that nobody needed to worry about. There is a much bigger story underneath this, a story about what's actually sitting beneath Ottawa, a story about what has happened before, and a story about what could still come. So stay with me through this entire video because further in, I'm going to explain something that most people in Canada genuinely do not know. And when you hear it, you will look at that footage very differently. Let's start with what happened. Earthquakes Canada reported a magnitude 3.9 earthquake struck at approximately 12:36 p.m., with the epicenter located 20 kilometers northeast of Shawville, Quebec. That is roughly 77 kilometers, about 48 miles northwest of Ottawa City Centre. The earthquake was at a depth of 13 kilometers. That's about 8 miles underground. Shallow, not deep, and that matters enormously. I'll explain exactly why in a few minutes. The quake was felt across a massive area: Ottawa, Eastern Ontario, Montreal, and even Toronto. Toronto is over 450 kilometers away from the epicenter. That is 280 miles of shaking. Let that sink in for a moment. Thousands of people sent reports to Earthquakes Canada within minutes of it hitting, and the reactions that came in from residents, I have to say, they tell the real story. From Otter Lake, Quebec. The house was shaking and it scared us. Neighbors said pictures fell right off the walls of their homes. From Constance Bay, the building was vibrating and it sounded like a large truck going by. It increased to where we felt the vibration throughout the building. And from Pembroke, Ontario, a woman named Bryony Baxter was eating lunch at home. She said her dog leapt off the couch, her cat panicked, and she could hear her washer and dryer banging in the basement. When the animals know before you do, that tells you something about the intensity of what hit. And this was all happening while Canada's Parliament was sitting live, while elected officials were mid-debate, while the cameras were rolling. Nature doesn't care about the parliamentary calendar. It doesn't check the schedule. It just moves. Now I want you to think about what that moment was like inside the House of Commons. You're a member of Parliament. You're sitting in one of the most historic chambers in North America. The room has been there for generations. And suddenly, the camera shakes. The room shakes, and every person in that chamber realizes at the same moment, this is an earthquake. Right now, happening right now. I have to tell you, when I watched that live footage, I felt it. I felt a pressure on my chest just imagining being in that room. Because inside a building like that, with its stone walls, its vaulted ceilings, its suspended infrastructure, even a 3.9 magnitude shake is not something you brush off. Researchers have pointed out that suspended ceilings, the kind found in office buildings and government structures, are among the most commonly damaged components during earthquakes. When they fall, they create both falling hazards and barriers to evacuation. And this is Parliament Hill, guys. This is not a random office building. This is a structure that houses the decisions of an entire nation. Now think about this. The earthquake hit at 12:36 in the afternoon. Parliament was in session, multiple floors, staff, officials, press, security, all inside, all feeling the ground move beneath them. A Natural Resources Canada seismic analyst named Chris Boucher confirmed that a magnitude 3.9 would be felt by, in his words, quite a few people. But he said it wasn't expected to cause serious damage. And thankfully, this time, that was correct. But the key word there is this time. Because if you look deeper, and I mean really look deeper, what sits beneath Ottawa tells a very different story about what is possible, and I want you to hear that. Before I go into that, because this is the part that genuinely shocked me when I researched it, can you give this video an early like and a hype? Share it with a friend who thinks Canada doesn't have earthquakes. Leave me a comment. It doesn't cost you anything, but it helps this channel grow so I can keep bringing you stories like this, fresh, fast, and factual. Thank you. Now, let me tell you what is actually underneath Canada's capital. Most Canadians think of earthquakes as a West Coast problem. Vancouver, British Columbia, the Pacific Ring of Fire, right? That's where earthquakes happen, not Ottawa. Not the nation's capital, sitting in the middle of the country, but here is what they don't teach you in school. The Western Quebec Seismic Zone is a seismically active area stretching across the Ottawa Valley in eastern Ontario and western Quebec. It runs from Montreal all the way to Témiscamingue and from Cornwall up through the Laurentian Mountains. And Ottawa, Canada's capital city, sits directly inside this zone. The urban areas of Montreal, Ottawa, Hull, and Cornwall are all located within this seismic zone. Now, here's where it gets really interesting and really important. This zone averages approximately one seismic event every 5 days. Every 5 days. The ground beneath Ottawa is moving on average once a week. Most of these events are tiny, too small to feel, but the pattern is there. The zone is active. It has always been active. So when that 3.9 hit the House of Commons on camera yesterday, that wasn't some random anomaly from nowhere. That was the Western Quebec seismic zone doing what it has been doing for centuries. Now, let me explain why this zone is so active, because this is the part I find absolutely fascinating. Beneath the Ottawa Valley, the geology is ancient and complex. Most of the earthquakes in western Quebec occur within or near the boundaries of a Grenville Age geological belt, rocks that are approximately 1 billion years old, and along a younger fault zone running beneath the Ottawa River. 1 billion years old. That's the rock beneath the city. And that fault zone running beneath the Ottawa River, that's the Ottawa Bonnecaire Graben, a rift valley that formed hundreds of millions of years ago when the North American continent tried to split apart. It failed. The continent didn't split, but those ancient fault lines are still there, still sitting in the crust, still capable of being reactivated. Research published in the scientific journal Earth and Space Science found that several faults within the Ottawa region, including the Hazeldean Fault on the western edge of Ottawa itself, are optimally oriented to be reactivated under the current tectonic stress field. Read that again. There are faults underneath Ottawa City, not outside it, underneath it, that scientists say are positioned in a way that could allow them to move again. Now, this is where I really want you to pay attention, because the earthquake that hit yesterday was shallow, only 13 kilometers, 8 miles deep. And shallow earthquakes behave very differently from deep ones. When a shallow earthquake strikes, the energy doesn't have time to dissipate on the way up through the crust. It hits the surface harder. It shakes surface structures more intensely. Think of it like this. If someone throws a firecracker from 50 meters away, you barely feel it. If they put it on the ground right beneath your feet, same explosive. Very different experience. Shallow earthquakes are the close-range version, and this one, 13 kilometers deep, was close range. For a 3.9, the impact was relatively manageable, but the same shallow depth on a larger magnitude event would be a completely different story. So what has this zone produced in the past? I did some research, and what I found is something every person in Ottawa, Montreal, and Eastern Canada should know. Significant earthquakes associated with this seismic zone include the 1732 Montreal earthquake, the 1935 Témiscamingue earthquake, and the 1944 Cornwall-Messina earthquake. Let's talk about those. The 1935 Témiscamingue earthquake, this was a magnitude 6.2 event that shook the Témiscamingue area hard. A magnitude 6.2. That is not a tremor. That is a serious earthquake. Then in 1944, a magnitude 5.6 earthquake struck between Cornwall, Ontario, and Messina, New York, causing damage evaluated at $2 million of the time. In 1944 dollars, $2 million of damage. And more recently, On June 23, 2010, a magnitude 5.0 earthquake struck 32 kilometers north of Buckingham, Quebec. It was felt throughout western Quebec, Ottawa, and parts of Ontario, and as far away as Maryland, Michigan, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Vermont in the United States. That's 2010, within living memory. And in 2013, a magnitude 5.2 earthquake struck 17 kilometers north of Shawville, the same general area as yesterday's event, followed by a 4.1 magnitude aftershock just 10 minutes later. Shawville, the same area, the same fault system. Yesterday was not the first time. It will not be the last time. And yet, most people in Ottawa still think they live in earthquake-safe territory. CBC News has confirmed that no local earthquake in 127 years of government records has surpassed a magnitude 5.6 quake in September 1944. The record is 5.6, but the zone is capable of producing larger events. History shows that. Science shows that. And I think the question that nobody is really asking publicly is this: what would a magnitude 6 or 6.5 earthquake directly beneath Ottawa look like? Not near Shawville, not north of the city, but directly beneath the Parliament buildings, the downtown core, the Ottawa River. I'll tell you what geologists say about that. Ottawa is not just any city sitting in a seismic zone. Ottawa is ranked, and this is something that genuinely surprised me. Ottawa is considered the third most at-risk Canadian city for earthquake damage after Vancouver and Montreal. Third in the entire country, behind Vancouver, which everyone knows is earthquake country, behind Montreal. But Ottawa is number 3, and here's why the risk is more serious than most people realize. Much of Ottawa sits on soft, fine-grained marine post-glacial sediments, the kind of soils left behind after the last ice age when the Champlain Sea covered this region. These soft sediments amplify earthquake shaking dramatically compared to solid bedrock. This is called site amplification, and it is a massive deal. Think of it this way: if you hold a bowl of water and you shake the bowl very gently, what happens to the water? It sloshes, it amplifies the movement. Now imagine that bowl is filled with soft, ancient marine clay, and the bowl itself is being shaken by an earthquake. The soft ground beneath large parts of Ottawa acts exactly like that. It amplifies the shaking, so even a moderate earthquake, one that might cause minimal damage in a city built on hard bedrock, can cause significantly more shaking in Ottawa's downtown core. And that matters when you think about Parliament Hill, about the office buildings, about the bridges over the Ottawa River, about the old stone infrastructure of a city that was built long before modern seismic building codes existed. Between the years 1980 and 2000 alone, there were 16 earthquakes stronger than magnitude 4.0 in the western Quebec seismic zone, with many more of lesser magnitude. 16 earthquakes above 4.0 in just 20 years, that's almost one per year, and most people in Ottawa had no idea because most were felt, but not seriously damaging, but each one is a reminder the zone is alive, the zone is restless, and yesterday it interrupted Parliament. So what happens now? What should residents in Ottawa and Eastern Canada actually be watching for? First, aftershocks. After any earthquake, even a moderate 3.9, the fault system that moved can continue to adjust. Smaller aftershocks are normal and expected. Most will be too small to feel, but they are part of the process. Second, and this is the important one, watch whether Earthquakes Canada reports any increase in activity in the Shawville-Ottawa Valley corridor over the coming days and weeks. A single event is one thing. A cluster of events in the same zone over a short period, that is a different conversation. The 2013 magnitude 5.2 near Shawville was followed almost immediately by a 4.1 aftershock, as I mentioned, yesterday's 3.9. We should monitor whether the fault system releases any follow-on activity. Third, this event should be a serious prompt for Ottawa residents to actually think about earthquake preparedness, not in a panic, not in a doomsday way, but in a practical, real way. Do you have a go bag? Do you know what to do if you are in a building and the floor starts shaking? Do you know that in older Ottawa buildings with soft soil beneath them, You should not just stand in a doorway, which is outdated advice. You should drop, cover, and hold on. The science on this is clear, and it's worth knowing before the next event. Because in the Western Quebec seismic zone, there will be a next event. The zone averages one seismic event every 5 days. The question is not whether it happens again. The question is how large. And I have to say, yesterday's moment inside the House of Commons, that was nature sending a very visible, very televised, very on the record reminder. The ground beneath Ottawa is not sleeping. It is not stable. It is part of an ancient, complex, active seismic system, and it doesn't matter how important the building above it is. It doesn't matter how many elected officials are sitting inside. When the Earth decides to move, it moves. So, guys, I hope this gave you a different perspective on what happened in Ottawa yesterday. This wasn't just a camera shake on a live stream. This was the Western Quebec seismic zone, reminding an entire country that Canada has earthquake risk, not just on the West Coast, but in the heart of the nation's capital. And the history of this zone, the geology beneath Ottawa, and the science of shallow intraplate earthquakes all tell the same story. This is not random. This is a pattern, and now you know it. I have other videos in the end screen about major seismic events around the world, including some that will completely change how you think about intraplate earthquake risk. Go watch those. If you want to support the channel, there's a Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. I don't want to do any brand deals. You know how I feel about that. Just a coffee. It keeps the research going. It keeps me on the pulse for you. And if you want to become a member, hit the join button, behind the scenes content, early access, private videos, all in there. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for sharing this. Stay safe, guys. Be aware. Look up, look around, look at what's beneath your feet sometimes, because you might be more surprised than you think. Bye-bye.